presentations about service animals, people often hear stories about how remarkable and life-changing these dogs are, and the audience leaves feeling inspired and amazed. This isn't one of those talks. Really, these animals are amazing, brilliant creatures who can be critically helpful to your life, but having them in public can also be very frustrating. I didn't always know this. The first time I considered getting a service animal was long before I got Lulu. I was at university, in a hallway studying, and because I've been completely deaf from the age of 7, I wasn't listening when a man grabbed my shoulder. As I looked up at him, my first thought was, I really could use a service animal, because he kind of looked like this. My second thought was I should really leave the building, because there was a fire going on in the restaurant below, and although hundreds of people had walked behind me, no one knew I was deaf, so no one had told me. When you get a service animal, many things will happen to you out in public that you are not warned about. People are often confused when you have a service dog and an invisible disability. They don't know how to react. People can be rude or inappropriate, judgmental, and sometimes even verbally abusive. They block access, create barriers, and make life more difficult for people living with disabilities, whether they realize it or not. So, after many frustrating years of educating people, I decided to make a list of my top 3 tips on how to train yourself to be a good human. Tip number 1, don't make assumptions about the handler or their disability. I want you to take a moment. Look at the people around you. Can you see their entire medical history? Probably not. A cursory glance is not enough to judge. Dogs can be trained for so many invisible disabilities, such as autism, diabetes, seizures, and a whole list more. Just because a person doesn't look disabled doesn't mean they are not. People look at me, they look at Lulu, and they assume I'm blind. And then, when I jump into my car and drive off, those people look perplexed and concerned. When I first walked out on stage with Lulu, what was your first thought? It's normal to be curious, and that's okay, but don't let that first thought guide your actions. Traveling. It can be tough for anyone. My husband and I had to get a taxi from the airport to make a connection. Our timing was very tight, so my husband ran ahead to secure the taxi and began loading our luggage. When I arrived with Lulu, the driver took one look at us and unloaded the luggage. He denied us service. He made an assumption that I didn't really need a service dog from that one quick look. Another fare jumped in his cab. They sped away. We missed our connection. Tip number 2, don't judge the validity of the service dog by the handler. Let's talk about something frequently in the news and something many handlers have experienced: fake service animals. It's important to understand that there is not yet a national standard in Canada to legislate service dogs beyond what is in the Canadian Human Rights Code. Each province or jurisdiction may have additional protection laws and identification suggestions, but they cannot override federal laws against discrimination due to disability. Typically, there are 3 categories of assistive animals. The first, service animals, or more commonly, service dogs. Service animals are protected by law and are guaranteed access to any building or venue that provides service to the public. They go wherever their handler goes. Service animals cannot be denied access without also denying their handler because of their disability. These dogs are highly trained to perform a task to mitigate their owner's disability. Lulu, for example, is always listening to sounds, such as fire alarms, which would have been handy back at university. The second category is therapy dogs. These dogs are obedience trained, and their primary purpose is to help people other than their handler. You might have seen them as visitors to hospitals or nursing homes or similar kinds of situations. They do not have any access rights in public facilities. They attend by invitation only. The third category is emotional support animals, or ESAs. ESAs are not a legislated or protected category in Canada. But due to widespread use in other countries, Canadians often believe that they are. Regardless, ESAs are very important to a wide range of disabilities that cannot be supported by service animals. The important distinction is that they're not trained. They do not perform specific tasks, and they do not have any public access rights beyond what a business would grant them. So, with these categories in mind, what are the fake service dogs we're seeing in the news? Well, sometimes they are legitimate ESAs or therapy dogs with a handler that innocently doesn't understand the laws and what is required to use the label and access privilege of a service animal. But the bigger and more common issue is sometimes people without disabilities are purchasing vests or IDs off the internet specifically to pass their pets off as assistive animals. It's almost become a trendy thing to do. Ironically, the sites that most of these people are using are scams. They have no legitimate value. So, what's the big deal? These people, they're not hurting anyone, right? Well, actually they are. When you bring an untrained pet into the public, you're exposing them to a lot of stressful and sometimes dangerous situations. Service animals have been trained from birth to handle those situations, to remain calm and continue doing their jobs. Untrained pets will not handle those situations well. And then they can leave a negative experience for anyone encountering them, and that experience will affect their future actions with legitimate service animals. After several incidents, including a customer attempting to bring a peacock onto a plane as an emotional support animal, airlines started changing their rules. They started putting up more barriers, more checks. And yes, maybe it's necessary to weed out people who abuse those rules, but for someone who legitimately needed that animal, this might mean now they can't travel, or they can't access that service when they need to. So, how do you know a service animal is really a service animal? Well, you look at the animal itself. Is it a dog? Check. Is it on the ground? Check. Groomed, well-behaved? Check. You can assume at this point that this is probably a service animal. There are always exceptions, of course, if the dog is inappropriately barking, growling, misbehaving, marking. You can and should ask them to leave. With that being said, please do not start policing service animals if you are just a passerby. If you have concerns, approach management or an authority in the area. I once had some random person in a store yell at me. Tell me to leave. Dogs aren't allowed. Unfortunately, I wasn't listening at that time. As I mentioned earlier, it's a problem when you're completely deaf. So this person became more frustrated, walked over to us, grabbed Lulu's leash, and tried to take her from me. And this is not okay. In some areas, including Manitoba, it's illegal. If you are concerned, please remember, you have zero right to anyone's medical details. You have zero ability to determine if that person actually needs the dog. Tip number 3, don't distract the service dog while they're working, and yes, this includes petting. One thing I hope most people know about service animals is that you shouldn't distract them, and this includes feeding them, talking to them, and petting them. Most people don't know why, though. I know, we should be polite and educate people when in public, but sometimes you don't have the time, or you're not in the mood. Some people don't have the ability to verbally explain due to their disability, and that should be okay. Service dogs are very focused on what they are doing. Lulu is always listening for things, trying to figure out whether or not I need to know about that sound. When they are distracted, they can have a harder time getting back into the groove of things, and they can miss cues they need to catch in order to keep us safe. There is never a good time to distract a service animal when they are working. A friend of mine, who's blind, was going down some stairs with her service dog when a stranger decided that they wanted to pet the dog. Without any warning, they touched the dog's back. And the dog at this point was so focused on guiding his handler safely down the stairs that when he got touched, he turned. And because of the way the harness is attached to my friend, she turned as well. She missed her step. She fell. And the dog fell with her. They both went down the stairs. They were both injured. And why? Because of this person's need to pet the dog over my friend's safety. I know what you're thinking, but I always ask first. And that's true, you should ask. That should be a rule for any dog, not just a service animal. But I think it's important for each of us to examine our motivations. Do you really need to pet the dog? Why? Imagine yourself at the end of a busy workday. You need to run into the store, grab milk, and get home. You need to make supper or pick up your kids, or you have a meeting. You're on a mission. Get in and get out as fast as possible. Once, I counted being stopped over 20 times in a store by people asking to pet Lulu. 20 times. Each time I stopped, said no, explained why, and dealt with the inevitable disappointment and complaints and judgment. It added up to a lot of time and a lot of unnecessary frustration. Petting, it's distracting. And it's not necessary. And in some jurisdictions, it's illegal. About 2 years ago, after getting Lulu, I had a situation I will never forget. I was in a store with my husband when a 4-year-old boy and his mother walked in front of me. The boy saw Lulu, got upset, and looked at his mom and yelled, "Mom, there's a dog in the store. Dogs aren't allowed in the store. She's breaking the rules." And I honestly expected his mother to shush him and they carry on, because that tends to be what happens when people see the dog. Instead, his mother shot me an apologetic look, mouthed, "Sorry." And she knelt down to her son to explain. Yes, dogs are not allowed in the store, that's right, but this is a special dog. They help do things for people who need help, if they can't see or can't hear or are in wheelchairs like Nana. We need to give them space and not pet them. Well, the boy thought about it, looked over at Lulu, said, "Okay," wandered off. And I thought, wow, what a great teachable moment, right? And this could have been the end of the story. However, As I finished shopping and waited in the checkout, I saw that same boy again, but this time with his dad. His dad saw Lulu and became very excited. Decided to tap his son on the shoulder and say, look at the puppy. I bet if you ask nicely, she'll let you pet her. The boy saw that it was Lulu, looked over, rolled his eyes, said, Dad, no. That is a special helper dog. We have to give her space and not pet her so she can help her person. That kid gets it. Thank you.